So in case you don't know, you know now. You are tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Thomas. Late night, Thursday night edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Normally, I like to go live Wednesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, but I have been on a world tour, if you will, around sports radio. Cheek to Vegas, Cheektowaga, and Amherst today. Cheektowaga Monday, Amherst Thursday, and back in the studios in LKPT. So I thought I'd be live by now. I thought I would have done a show by now, but we'll have this available for the listeners Friday morning as they drive to work, and obviously right now as you listen to it live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel, you will hear me riff on Ralph Krueger. My thoughts on the next Buffalo Sabres head coach as the Sabres made this announcement, and I really want to dedicate a full episode to this topic. So bear with me, hop on the magic carpet ride. Yes, that is an Aladdin reference. And let's get to it. So the Buffalo Sabres announced that Ralph Krueger will be their next head coach. And this was a hiring that I think around the National Hockey League, most analysts and most within the NHL media thought that this was a little bit of a shock. There had been Tippett's name thrown around, Jacques Martin's name thrown around, Smith's name thrown around, the assistant from Toronto that actually got hired today by the Ottawa Senators. There's been a lot of names that have been thrown around. Even Lindy Ruff's name was thrown around. I didn't really take that too seriously, but that name was even thrown around. Lindy Ruff, former Buffalo Sabres head coach, was thrown around. Those rumors I don't think were too legit, but that was a name that was thrown out there. That was thrown out there. So Lindy Ruff is the last of the Mohicans as far as a coach that the Sabres have had that was successful. That feels like such a long time ago with the laundry list of head coaches that the Sabres specifically have had since. I say Buffalo, when I say Buffalo, I'm referring to the Sabres in this podcast, not the Bills. So when Buffalo let go of Lindy, they go from Ron Rolston to Ted Nolan to Dan Bilesma to Phil Housley and now to Ralph Krueger, all in a span of about 7-8 years. It's a lot of coaches. It's a lot of different brain trusts at the helm of the roster within your organization. Not the GM, but the guy that actually has to put the lines together, the guy that has to actually hit the ice on the practice ice with the players and articulate how does he want the offense to play, how does he want the defense to play, and who will be in the crease? Who will be the netminder for the Buffalo Sabres? I think that is, in a nutshell, the job of an NHL head coach, to manage the lines, to manage the matchups, manage the power play, and figure out in his own particular way, how can I fit these pieces on this chessboard to beat the opposition. And some coaches have done that really well in the NHL these last few years especially. One of my favorite coaches in the NHL right now and always has been is John Tortorella. That guy will chew a player out, and he will also support a player when it is deemed necessary. He knows when to turn the villain hat on. and he knows when to be Mr. Nice Guy. Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Brightside, or the Jekyll and Hyde thing, we'll say. As far as my initial reaction to Ralph Krueger, I didn't know much about him. I had known that he was a head coach for a short time with the Edmonton Oilers, and that was in a lockout-shortened season back in 2012 and 2013, but I had to really go back and look at that year and look at the record of, I believe, 19 and 22 wins and loss record for Ralph Krueger, and say to myself, well, I really can't judge much off of that. I really can't say that he's not equipped enough to be a head coach in the National Hockey League when he coached one season on a pretty bad team in a state of transition for sure, as Edmonton has been in for quite a while, much like Buffalo, and he didn't really do too well. 19, 22, and 7, counting the 7 overtime losses, missed the playoffs, and wasn't given a second shot to come back, which some people could say, what's up with that? That's not cool. And I would agree. You know, that's should he have gotten another shot? Only, you know, the only time will tell based on how Ralph does with the Buffalo Sabres. But if I go back and I look at Ralph Krueger, 2012, 2013, I would see that he was replaced very quickly by Dallas Eakins, who was the coach for 2 seasons, who amassed a 36 and 63 record. Todd Nelson brought in 2014 to 2015. Todd McClellan, who was also linked to the Sabres, brought in 2015, 2016 to 2018 as he coached the first 20 games of the 2018-2019 season and was then replaced by Ken Hitchcock, who is well known for his Stanley Cup run with the Dallas Stars, third winningest coach in NHL history, assistant coach for the Canadian Olympic National Team, coached the St. Louis Blues, the Columbus Blue Jackets, Philadelphia Flyers, Dallas Stars in 2017 and 2018. So Ken Hitchcock has most definitely bounced around. And Ken Hitchcock was not brought back. So Edmonton is currently, they're still looking for a head coach. After all that, they're still looking for a head coach. So Ralph Krueger has actually found himself back at square one in a way. And that was a thought that I originally had. He's found himself back at square one in the National Hockey League on a team in flux, on a team in a state of transition, on a team with plenty of question marks. And the question is, can Ralph Krueger bring out the most out of what the Sabres already have? The Jack Eichels, the Sam Reinharts, the Casey Middlestats of the world. Can they do that? Can he do that? And anyone that is within the National Hockey League seems to believe that he can. Players that have played for him, namely former Buffalo Sabre Thomas Vanek, who played for Ralph Krueger a long time ago in an international league of some sort, said that Ralph Krueger is a very smart coach. He knows when to turn it on. He knows when to turn it off. He can turn on the heat, bring the heat. Can get a little aggressive with his players when he has to be. But he can also be that soft-spoken, puts his arm around your coach that says, you did the best you could. I support you. Almost like that fatherly figure. I've seen a lot of that. I've heard a lot of that. I've seen a lot of that. And for that reason alone, I am intrigued. I am intrigued by this hire because the Buffalo Sabres, their last two head coaching hires in particular were two coaching hires where the coaches just could not command the respect of the players. For whatever reason, you can blame the players even a little bit too, that the players would not play for these last two coaches, but these coaches did not get the respect. They did not do anything to make the players say, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to play our asses off for that guy. For whatever reason. But if they don't get this right, if this hire is not the right hire, for whatever reason, if this hire ends up blowing up in their face, believe you me, Buffalo Sabres general manager Jason Bottrill is in a world of trouble. The pressure is on Jason Bottrill. And I've seen a lot of hockey writers out there throw out these articles on Jason Bottrill and say that, oh, he has some, and I even said it to an extent, but I'll one-up that. A lot of articles are saying that JB he's got brass ones. He's got cojones, whatever word you want to use, to go out there and hire a Ralph Krueger. Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. He's going out there. He's hiring an out-of-the-box coach. But Jason Bottrill's job was on the line before that hire was even made. Jason Bottrill failed one time. Terry Pegula was willing to give him that second shot to get it right the second time. And if there's any inclination that it was the wrong hire out of the get-go, right out of the gate, from the get-go, right out of the gate, Bottrill is gone. Bottrill, he's gone. Whatever pronunciation that people use, I've heard them all. From even Brian Duff, from Marty Biron, from the players. I don't know if anyone can get this guy's name right. But I think that if you are JB, you go out, you hire the guy that you know the most. He went out and he hired the guy that he knows the most. Apparently his father, who's a teacher out in Winnipeg, Manitoba, one of the two, said that he taught Ralph and did teach Ralph in grade school. So there's a connection there, which is cool. That's a unique story. It's cool how things came full circle for JB and Ralph, and hopefully that is beneficial to their working partnership now that Bott's still the GM of the Sabres and Krueger now the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. Topic of discussion that I talked about on Trainwreck Sports with Degenerate Al, that was brought up by Degenerate Al, was whether or not Jack Eichel is this unsung hero, this leader that fans believe he is, or that he is portrayed as. And my take on that is kind of it's a double-edged sword, because I look at Jack Eichel and I say he's played 5 seasons in the National Hockey League. He'll be playing for his third different head coach. That shows an ineptitude from the front office to the ownership to hire the right coach. And it also shows that Jack Eichel wears his heart on his sleeve. If things are not going well with Jack Eichel and his coach, chances are that coach is going to get fired. If things aren't going well with Jack Eichel and a teammate, chances are that teammate is going to get traded. And by going well, I mean maybe he wants to hit up Chippewa with that teammate a few times a week. That guy's gone. And Evander Kane. That guy's gone. No more bottoms up for Jack Eichel and Evander Kane. But Jack Eichel looks at this team now and he sees, not only have I had 3 different head coaches in 5 seasons, not only have I not made the playoffs in my NHL career, but I've had this revolving door of a supporting cast around me Vander Kane, gone. Ryan O'Reilly, my number 2 center that was supposed to be the guy to take some pressure off of me as the number 1 center, he's gone. And now the next guy to come in the door that I've had immediate offensive success with on the same line, on the first line, Jeff Skinner. What is going to happen with that? Now, I have a theory on Jeff Skinner that will really shock some people, but I felt like when Buffalo made the trade for Jeff Skinner, it was such a lucky trade, as most of us would say, but I felt like Buffalo was going to re-sign Jeff Skinner prior to the season even starting, and to know that they're paying him $6.5 million on his last year of his deal with the Carolina Hurricanes, and they decided to not negotiate during a season, or could not get a deal done during a season while negotiating, is tough. It's very tough, because I think this guy could have been had long term for much cheaper of a price than what he will command on the open market. Jeff Skinner, in pretty much any NHL free agency countdown, Jeff Skinner is rated as a top 5 free agent in this NHL free agent class. That says a hell of a lot. That says Jeff Skinner is that good. He is that guy. Ralph Krueger, I'm sure he'd love to have him. I'm sure he'd love to start this process with Jeff Skinner rather than without him. And Jeff Skinner coming to Buffalo was really fit in here like a glove. An Ontario boy, probably about half hour away from his hometown, if that. And I think that could be what helps him stay here. But I also think that money talks, and this is a business. And in this day and age of sports, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, you name it, especially basketball, but in any major sport, player loyalty to a logo, to a city, to a franchise is slim to none. You really have to pay a man to stay where he is. Case in point, Mike Trout gets $430 million to stay with the Angels, where the Angels probably won't compete for a playoff, won't compete for a World Series championship, won't compete for a playoff berth, none of that. And Mike Trout will continue to be the best player in baseball. Meanwhile, he's getting paid as such. So is that going to be Jeff Skinner? No, but Jeff Skinner's going to get good money. He's going to get some good dollars and cents. How much does this Ralph Krueger hiring affect whether Skinner will re-sign here? That's a really good question, a question that I've received a lot from the Sabres fans. Do you think Krueger will help Skinner stay? I don't really think the coaching hire mattered a lot. And you call me crazy saying that, but I really think it comes down to dollars and cents and years that are being offered, that are being thrown around for the services of Jeff Skinner. Numbers that are being reported is $8.5, $9.5 million, a multi-million dollar, or multi-year deal, I should say. Vander Kane, he goes from the Buffalo Sabres to the San Jose Sharks, and he gets signed 7-7 right out of the gate. So how much does Jeff Skinner get? 7-7? 8-8? I don't know. 8-5? 8.5-5? Less years, more salary. 4 years, 36. Do you pay two players in Jack Eichel and Jeff Skinner almost $20 million out of your salary cap? That's a real interesting question. When you have all this young talent, the Dahleens, the Middlestats, those guys will be coming up on contract extensions very soon. So you have to be very smart with your money in this instance with Jeff Skinner. But you do need Jeff Skinner. I mean, if you let this guy walk out the door, you're going to really piss off your captain. And you're going to create a ripple effect of offensive ineptitude once again. And we saw that last year with Ryan O'Reilly. And I was on a radio show today with Derek Kramer and Frank Arcuri, and I talked about Ryan O'Reilly in the beginning. about how it's tough to see him doing well. It's not tough to see him doing well because I have this bitter resentment towards Ryan O'Reilly. I have nothing against Ryan O'Reilly. His comments were blown far out of proportion by the media, by everybody. Ryan O'Reilly is a good player in this league. But Ryan O'Reilly was playing for a coach that ultimately, we didn't know it at the time, was not motivating the players to the fullest of his ability and motivating the players to play at the fullest of their ability. So when you have that, creates this tension, it creates this anxiety that Ryan O'Reilly just could not stand playing under those circumstances. And it was for the best for him to go to another team. But he was very crucial to the Buffalo Sabres. And I think that is seen even more after this season. As great a season as Jeff Skinner had, as great a player as Jack Eichel is, as dynamic a talent as Casey Middlestad is, as dynamic a player as Ristolainen can be when he wants to be, it seems. Ryan O'Reilly was the secondary center that Buffalo longed for during this season. And it sucks to see him on the Blues doing as well as he's doing because of that, not because I want to see Ryan O'Reilly fail. I want to see any former Sabre do well, so I can be like, well, good for him. Good for him. That's awesome. It's great. But a lot of people have that opinion, that they don't want to see Ryan O'Reilly do well because of some stupid, horribly timed quote that was blown out of proportion a little bit. But as far as Ralph Krueger goes, he's got players to work with. I don't think this is nearly the same situation that he had dealt with in Edmonton. I think this is a very different situation, but it is one that requires immediate results. This team needs to get better. This team has the longest playoff drought in the NHL. You have one Buffalo team of the longest playoff drought in the NFL, and then another team have the longest playoff drought in the NHL. So that is not fun. As Buffalonians, as Sabres fans, that's not a fun night at the office to be a Buffalo sports fan. But you have to do what you have to do. You have to represent the 716, hashtag One Buffalo, hashtag Thomas Takeover. As I've always represented One Buffalo, I always will. But it's tough. I won't lie to you. I'll be the first to admit it. It can be tough sometimes. Your emotions can get the best of you when rooting for these two teams. But I think that Ralph is a very outside-the-box hire, an intriguing hire for the fact that this guy really did not have to come back to the NHL. He was in a very firm spot with Southampton Soccer, Northampton, something Hampton Soccer. Not the big soccer guy. But he was in a good spot. And really running the day-to-day operations of that team. And then he gets pried back into the NHL. 7 years later. I mean, that's a gap. That's not a little break. That's a gap. A lot of things can change, especially in the sport of hockey, in 7 years. Question is, will they change for the better for Ralph, or will he just be another Sabres coach that gets fired in 2 years? I certainly hope not, because when we fired Bylsma, we still had Bylsma on the books. When we hired Housley, and when we fired Housley, we still got Housley on the books. So let's not pay coaches to not coach for us after they've coached for us. Let's not do that anymore. Let's give Ralph the 3 years he needs and go from there. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas take on Ralph Krueger. Overall, I think it's a very intriguing hire. It's out of the box. It's not an NHL coaching retread or an NHL former player of the Sabres that wants to reclaim his old Sabres glory. None of that. It's a coach that comes highly recommended by some big-name analysts, some big-name scouts in the National Hockey League, and is a name that kind of fell off the face of the earth in terms of the NHL head coaching scene due to the fact that he had this really pivotal day-to-day role with a premier soccer team. Very interesting situation, but one that it'll definitely be fun to keep an eye on and to analyze and to nitpick and do all that stuff as I always do on the Thomas Take Sports podcast. But like I said, I am excited. I am intrigued. We'll see what happens. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports podcast, Thursday, May. What the heck day is it? May 23rd. I tell you, I know I wrapped it up, but I got more to say here. If the Sabres don't re-sign Jeff Skinner, you really got to wonder what will keep the fans coming to KeyBank Center. Because we've watched this team get completely blown to pieces and then rebuilt and then blown to pieces again and then blown to pieces and then rebuilt. And then we've seen it so many times. And it's so hard to be a Sabres fan. I talked with Jake Watkins about this on the NFL Draft Day podcast. As far as the state of the Sabres, it was before they hired Ralph Krueger, when they were in the midst of their coaching search, which felt like an eternity, by the way, that they were actually able to bring somebody in, and leads me to believe that maybe the Sabres aren't as attractive as a destination as they think they are. You have one coach say, no, I'm a minor league coach in Toronto, I'm good. But then he goes to Ottawa. That's a tough pill to swallow. That sucks. But overall, I mean, if you do not sign Jeff Skinner, you're going to have those same fans that remembered the horrifying day that was June 1st, 2007, I believe, where Daniel Briere and Chris Drury walked out the door and the stupid then Buffalo Sabres front office decided to match a Thomas Vanek offer sheet from the Edmonton Oilers that was to the tune of 7 years, $50 million or something to the tune of, it was $50 million. That was the final number. But I think it was a 7-year deal, which is horrible. And Thomas Vanek was not worth that money, but Buffalo matched it. They didn't want to lose Briere, Drury, and Vanek the same day, I guess. So they got one of the three. But they got the one out of the three that needed one or both of those guys in order to produce to the fullest of his talents, to his capacity, and they let both of those guys go. Had they decided to keep Briere and Drury and let Vanek go, they would have got 4 first-round picks from Edmonton over the course of the next 3-4 years, I think it was. Because Edmonton might have had multiple firsts in 1 year, and Buffalo would have got both of those, but we'll just say 4 first-round picks from Edmonton, just for the hell of it, the sake of it. Sake of our sanity, not having to go back and check. But you get the point. I really felt like that was a horrible day in the franchise's history, probably one of the worst ever, and now you have a player like Jeff Skinner who might be facing the same fate that Chris Drury and Danny Briere met back in 2007. On the outside looking in, wondering, well, the Sabres don't appear to be interested. I got to sign somewhere. I got to go somewhere where the money's at. Where's the money at? And Buffalo's not throwing it out. But we'll see. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. My thoughts on Ralph Krueger, the Buffalo Sabres, and so much more. Tune in Sunday as I preview Henry Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes, UFC flyweight title, men's flyweight championship. Then you have the people's main event, former UFC interim lightweight title holder Tony Ferguson versus the baddest man on the planet. And no, he is not a heavyweight. He is Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I cannot wait for that fight. I'm going to preview the main event, co-main event, Sunday night, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on YouTube. Please tune in. Please submit some comments in the comment section below on the YouTube video. Please throw out some messages on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook. And please follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm wrapped up. I'm done. Good night.